An Android smartphone that becomes a tablet when you need it. That's the idea behind the new Padphone X from ASUS and AT&T, and we have thoughts about the combined phone and tablet dock.
The year was 2014, and I bet you forgot that the idea of a phone that could turn into a tablet is actually not new. Taiwanese phone maker ASUS came up with the bold solution of a tablet that could be powered by your phone when docked, and then the story goes on. If you go back to 2009, you'd see the Celio RedFly, which tried to do something similar for Windows Mobile, which, by the way, is actually a 2007 idea that Palm invented with the Foleo. And listen, knock yourself out. I'm sure someone else did it first. The point is that this idea that your phone is not enough is pretty old. Those initial products might have failed because the technology was ahead of its time, but not because they were a solution in search of a problem. Listen, I love small tablets with stylus input, and sure, I also love my phone if its size doesn't get out of hand, but I hate to carry both. I hate having to keep files on one of them and then transfer them to another, or to depend on slow internet connections to sync them up. All I want is one device that can do multiple things, and it's crazy to think that a different version of the past came to solve that problem. Phones were folding more than 25 years ago because the shape of a handset only made sense half of the time. On that same premise, sometimes my phone is not enough, and sometimes my tablet is too much. But to not have to choose what to bring makes all the difference in the world. I'm Jaime Rivera with Pocketnow, and after a couple of months of using the Galaxy Z Fold 4, it's time for our extended review. I'll start by explaining that my needs for the gadgets that I always have with me is pretty peculiar. 20 years ago, I carried a phone to communicate and a pocket PC for productivity, since neither could do the same things, but we know that those things have evolved over time. As a result, I've drifted more to have one smaller device as my communicator and the larger one as my workhorse. For years, the Galaxy Note supplied that secondary demand, but for the past two, a foldable has done a far better job. I really like the Galaxy Z Fold 3, but love wasn't an adequate way to describe it. It was a great tablet and finally supported its own version of the S Pen, but it still wasn't a good phone. Sure, the outer screen was better than before, but still a bit too tall and with cameras that were just not good enough for the price point. By contrast, this Galaxy Z Fold 4 might look similar, but it's not. Samsung has shortened the footprint everywhere in a way to make the outer screen feel more like a regular phone, so much so that it's slowly become one of my favorite features. The added width over its predecessor is still not enough to be conventional, but I find myself liking this narrow approach more for one-handed use when I'm on the go, and also easier to grip when I'm on a call. That being said, it's not a light phone to hold by any means, but the new hinge design did help it shed enough of last year's weight to be closer to an iPhone 14 Pro Max. At a very tall 6.2 inches diagonal and 120Hz refresh rate, this has proven to be quite useful in getting all my phone stuff done without the need to go into tablet mode. 5 months later, and this Gorilla Glass Victus Plus still looks just as new and scratch-free as the Armor Aluminum, though I'll admit I have not dropped this phone once, and I do not intend to. I'll naturally drift to unfolding it in a calm setting like sitting at a coffee shop or during a long commute, and it does a great job at reminding me why I love small tablets. At 7.6 inches diagonal, it's now wider than before, making it more practical in my opinion than the newer iPad mini. Its AMOLED 2X is also far more advanced in color reproduction, refresh rate up to 120Hz, and peak brightness up to 1200 nits. Sure, the crease won't be a fan favorite for most, but it's a small price I'm willing to pay for the convenience it provides. Samsung's attention to detail in shrinking the bezels, covering the selfie camera even more, and making this ultra-thin glass stronger does not go unnoticed. Match this with a very loud pair of dual-firing speakers and content consumption is king. Allows it to be thinner than any other flagship. As a result, this has quickly become the small tablet I pair with my 15-year-old, I go stowaway keyboard to catch up on my email or write the script. I'm no artist to use this for sketches, but its S Pen support then allows me to highlight my scripts and jot down my notes over them on Microsoft OneNote as I would before on any iPad. It's the larger screen that makes watching YouTube a joy while I'm on the go. It's also funny that even if this new S Pen cover wasn't my favorite, the extended lip has helped me have an extra grip for prolonged use and even serves as a small prop while on a table. And listen, it might not have the endurance of a Kindle for books, but then does a far better job at handling the optional audible narration. It's when you multitask that you realize that the outer aspect ratio is genius because you pretty much have two of these phone screens stacked next to each other. Heck, you can even add a third one on the side, though with a bit more constraint than I'd like in real-world use. You can then store these combos on the Edge menu, and you'll love that even when you switch between other applications, these pairs remain on the menu for future reference. Samsung then went to the extent of creating an optional dock that you can keep accessible at all times to call on other applications, or a separate app launcher, or which you can then long press to hide. These are those moments where, regardless of how much you might love stock Android, you have to give it to One UI for doing this form factor more justice. 5 months later, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 has proven to be better than expected. It's powerful and yet crazy power efficient when compared to its previous generation, and my choice for 512 gigs of storage has allowed this to be the device that carries all of the data that I need while mobile. It's got all the latest forms of connectivity, wireless charging, and also a pretty decent power pack even for its size. But anyways, let's stop the love story right here. Sure, regardless of how good the Z Fold 4 is, it's not perfect. There are a few things that I'm mixed about with it, and a lot has to do with my experience using it. When it comes to hardware, even if everything still looks new, it seems like the crackling noise on the hinge is this subtle thing you're gonna have to get used to. Also, yeah, the gap when you close the phone does make it home for a lot of lint, but I'll forgive it because of how well the screen protector has aged over time. Now, as for software, well, as much as Samsung has tried to promote foldables, Android still seems to be the enabler that holds it back. Apps like Instagram now work fine on the outer screen, but the stories are still hit or miss when open. Anything other than the Samsung keyboard just won't know how to adapt to the different screens, which is unfortunate for us multilinguals. The whole multitasking approach is also hit or miss sometimes, with how buttons and menus are no longer available if you try to punch 3 applications at once. And then there's the whole transition between screens, which sometimes requires you to close the application if it doesn't conform. These are all things I'll mostly blame Android for, given how unpopular its tablets have been, because if you were to stick to only Samsung applications, everything else works fine. I have heard other complaints about its endurance, for example, but that actually hasn't been my case. This phone has been an all-day champ, which could be because I spend most of my time on the outer screen, and also because software updates have also made it better. Phone and data over AT&T's 5G network has also been pretty good. Seriously, when it comes to most essentials, this phone has done the trick every single time, and that's actually the same case for the cameras. You would think that I'd be mixed, but the story is actually completely different. See, it's understandable that this form factor won't have enough space to house the best sensors and optics, but I also understand that it's hard to convince anyone about that if they're paying more for this phone than every other. But the reality is that there's a lot of good in this phone. Think of this as if you were using a standard Galaxy S22 or S22 Plus with no extremes, but flagship results regardless. Good color, saturation, and detail during the day, and enough of a kick within all focal lengths for this to be a flagship I can trust. Even if you were to switch to night photos, this phone does admirably with better results from all cameras than a lot of the best phones in the industry. Obviously, what those phones can't do is then help you use the primary cameras for selfies, or to have the phone prop on a table for them. So long as you use all the outer cameras for this endeavor, all the results are great, because, yeah, the inner one is pretty much just for video calls. I'll admit I haven't been much to prop this phone anywhere over my fear of dropping it, but listen, the option is there for you. Sadly, it's no iPhone for video when it comes to the quality of the codec, but neither is the S22 Ultra, given all the added grain and warping that I see when I walk, in addition to the rolling shutter. That said, if you want 8K from the primary or 4K at 60 from all other cameras, these options are here, and they'd still earn my pick for third best, as I feel that Apple and Google are currently owning the spectrum better than anyone. To conclude, I think it's important for me to quote Denzel Washington when he says,
"Dreams without goals are just dreams. Without commitment, you'll never start, but without consistency, you'll never finish."
The biggest problem with the ASUS PadPhone, Celio RedFly, or Palm Foleo was not that the ideas were bad or even ahead of their time. It's that none of these companies persisted. Each succumbed to the pressure of conforming, and if we're honest, it's not like if any of them ended up succeeding in somebody else's ideal. You really gotta hand it to Samsung for roughing it out here. You gotta admire how much this company wants to reinvent the phone. Even with its shortcomings, in my opinion, this is a better device than others, because it's better than just a phone and better than just a tablet. Yes, the price for entry is steep, but then Samsung's trade-in deals are still the best in the industry. Just like in the case of the Z Flip 4, where I started with one phone and finished this review with another, I also bought this gray-green unit. That pre-order $200 credit with double the storage and the free case made trading my old phone too irresistible to not support this ideal. And listen, if you want a conventional phone, good for you. If you want to carry multiple devices, go for it. There's a sea of those in the market today, but none of the great ones are cheap. If I'm to go over the $1,000 bracket, I want my phone to be the coolest thing that anyone has ever seen, and so far I think this is it. I've said it before, if I'm to pay for an SUV, I want all-wheel drive and not just the larger sedan. I know these foldables had a rocky start, but Generation 4 has been great. So great that I have no problem in recommending it. Let us know if you agree with my assessment in the comments down below, and while you're at it, follow us on social media and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. You can also follow me on my personal handles to see me unfold phones like there's no tomorrow. Please give this video a thumbs up if you like what you saw. I'm Jaime Rivera. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.